Welcome back to Fancastic, your masterclass to masterclass. Christine, can we start out by talking about my hat today?
I love your hat. I love it. It's
So,
snowing here in Denver today, but I love the hat.
it's background. So, when I have insomnia and don't get sleep, I'm always cold. So, I do have it on, not for a fashion statement. But then I thought, I'm kind of rocking this hat, even though my 7-year-old nephew told me I look like a cat burglar. I'm like, well, he's 7. What does he know? I'm wearing the hat. I see guys wear baseball hats on podcasts all the time. So, I just
I
wanted to
love
call
it.
out the hat first, first and
I love
foremost.
it. I was gonna ask what the inspiration was. I love it.
Yeah, what's that? I'm cold. That's the inspiration today. I'm cold. My inspiration is not Coldplay, which I think was where
And
this
you look
whole
good.
it hat sensation started.
And you look good.
Thank you, thank you. So let's jump into the topic because it is a great one today. And why is it great? It's because it's based on your personal experience, and who better to talk about CAS and how to avoid pitfalls than someone who have been through the pitfalls, which is you. And so we've titled this episode Failure Fuels Success because it's so true. You can't be successful without a few failures. That's how you learn. But what we're specifically talking about are the lessons that you had in working better, not more. So let's dig into some of your failures, which have made you a phenomenal success and made you the master of CAS, so that other people can avoid them. And I really want to start with this overwhelming issue that has constantly plagued the profession, that firms take any client who walks through the door. It's been the premise forever because they want to keep people in their funnel. And what a lot of us have been preaching for a long time is you don't take anyone who walks through the door, you take your ideal clients, because that's when you really start to grow and scale. So you've been through this. Can you talk about this particular lesson in life of just taking any client?
Yeah, and I think this is one out of like 150 failures, right?
Right?
Just
We got a
being
lot of
an early
episodes to talk about all your failures. Yeah,
adopter, we can just make a whole lifetime of this.
that's
But
right.
I love what you say about the ICP, right? Like, what's your ideal client profile? Because we help firms identify what those are for each of the firms, but do you really stick to them? Or are you really taking any client that you can get? Because when, we're within a firm, we live in a world of more, and we're always just trying to get this more revenue, more clients, more scale. And for a long time, I let myself believe that growing the top line was the most important thing for my firm, for my practice line, for my team, and for me. But the truth was, I was keeping clients who had little to no margins. And a lot of the times I was doing that was because I liked them. I liked them as people. I liked what the business that they were creating and selling and doing. And I was invested in them as a human being in a relationship, but to my detriment, the firm's detriment, the team's detriment, right? And so I just feel like that was one of my biggest failures is taking on clients and then not having conversations with them about fee adjustments because I liked them. I thought I was being kind, but I was actually being dishonest with myself and my team. And I kept clients who weren't priced right. And I thought that was good for our top line revenue because that's what a lot of firms focus on. And when you look at top line revenue, it doesn't really matter what the margins are. You just want top line revenue. Margins were thin. My team
Those
felt it.
clients, you've got
Yeah,
scope creep on. You've got like 1,000 clients, but you've got 10% of them taking up 80% of your time. That's again, yeah, it's what firms don't think about when they're like, we just need to take anyone who comes through the door.
exactly. Exactly. And it's like buying clients, right? Are we buying clients to just hit this revenue goal that's not like scalable? There's no profit in it. And so at the end of the day, my team felt it and it wasn't their fault. It was my fault.
As the leader, right? And I think that's a really good distinction to make, is that you did set the tone and you were the one operating the business from the high level. So it really was up to you to take in whoever was coming through the door. Also up to you to define that ICP and then cascade that down. So I like that you brought that up. Like it's a leadership role thing. Like it really does have to start at the top.
Right. Exactly.
There is this epidemic, is like such an overstatement, but there is this common effect in the accounting profession where it is all about being nice and being kind, right? Like we love our clients. It's a relationship based business, but you can't build a scalable business on nice and kind because some clients just are not a good fit. So, you know, what are the steps that you take to move out of that? It's hard not to be nice, right? It's hard not to love your clients even though they might be draining your cash flow.
Right. And I think it starts actually, there's boundaries, but I do think it starts, if you have a prospect, you know, at first we didn't do the prospect analysis prior to onboarding clients, right? And so that impacted.
Which we talked about in prior episodes just so people know. Important piece in the process.
Right. So we priced it wrong. Even if we were billing hourly in the beginning and we weren't even coming out of the gate from a fixed fee perspective, I never billed them all of the hours that our team had incurred because it felt like too much and I didn't want to upset them and I was like they can't afford it or they're trying to create their business and so I would write that time off, which then doesn't translate into converting to fixed fees because they're used to that lower monthly bill already. I couldn't even convert it to a fixed fee to just even have any margin on it. And another reason was, oftentimes in the CAS space, we all know that we share these clients with the tax team, right? And so, when you have multiple services, from one firm to a client, a lot of times the tax team would say, you can't bill our clients that much, or, they're not going to pay that, or, and so we would basically acquiesce to the tax team to make the tax team even feel like they were preserving this relationship with their client, given that we were kind of giving our work away for free almost, right? And so the tax team didn't want to impair their relationship with the client, and we didn't want to impair our relationship with the tax team. And so there's multiple reasons for that, but that's just a couple of ours.
I mean, and it's a vicious cycle. I've seen this over and over in firms that you're pouring your soul into helping clients succeed, but undercharging them because you're not charging for those overage hours, like scope creep, it just gets out of hand. So essentially what you're doing then is subsidizing their business with your team's stress. And I think that's a really good way to put it. The firms don't think about that. They're like, "Oh, it's just a couple of hours more work on your team," right? So you're helping your client, but you're stressing out your team and yourself, quite frankly, because you're not meeting those margins. I just
Exactly.
wanted to state that.
Yeah, no, I think that we underestimate the impact that it has on CAS teams.
Yeah.
True, right? Because they're working their butts off. They're doing everything that the client's asking for, but they want to be successful. They wanted to feel like they're contributing to something great and to margins. But because I priced it wrong, they're running on a treadmill that just never stops. Whatever the client's request is that day, every day, every week could be something different. They're doing it, right? And we created this, go, go, go culture, and there was no pause for self assessment. So, by not billing the client for all of the hours that we incurred, it made them feel like their work wasn't valuable.
Well, of
That's the
course
way,
it is.
yeah,
Right.
right? Like, and
Plus they're
now,
stressed.
yeah. And so it was like, they have their own book of business and they want to be successful. So now I'm like, oh man, now I made you feel like all the time you put into it, we're not billing it. So what's that impact on your team?
Yeah. Well, what kept you in that loop? Because it's a destructive loop, right? What kept you in that loop?
It is destructive. And like this gets like psychological, right? And so I'm like, why did we start this way? And why did we
Business is psychological. There's a whole psychology behind business. Like there just is.
Well, and it's like, was this my issue or was this the industry issue? But, I feared that they didn't value our work. Why? I don't know. Like, felt like, we were taking too long to do some of the work, or maybe it was getting done at the wrong level. So it was at a higher rate when I had a manager doing something when maybe a staff should have been doing it. We feared that, raising their fees would damage that trust. Um, so in that though, where I failed is that I waited, right? And the longer you wait to have those awkward conversations, especially around money and pricing, it, it just nothing changed. And even though the scope had increased or the clients had a lot of growth, I never went back and had that conversation with them. So that was a fear because it was a fear of like, what if they say no? And what if, like, who knows? When you look back, you're like, okay, that was dumb, right? Also, a crazy aspect of that piece was it was being too busy to stop and have the conversation about their fees. So, especially when it related to the fact that we should be billing more because they were growing and we were doing more. And so every month I did the billing, I would think, oh my gosh, I need to schedule time with this client to have a conversation. And then the next day, you're putting out fires and doing all the things, and those conversations never happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it just kept building.
I think I've heard you say this before, but I've also heard firms say this, that undercharging, it's not generosity. You're not looking to give people, not looking to give money away. But when you have those non-ideal clients who are sucking up your margins, that's what happens. But what you're really doing is you're teaching people not to value you. You're teaching your clients not to value you. So just can you say more about that?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's exactly what you're saying, right? I realized like I was teaching clients how not to value us. Here we are on the advisory side, preaching business excellence to our clients, while practicing business neglect for myself, my team, and my firm, right? So, um, it just like in hindsight, it just felt so out of alignment that if we don't value our own time, how can we expect them to value our time? And again, this is a whole, feel like I should be laying on a couch talking to you.
Well, we could do that next time. I mean, I'm the, session is
Right.
open. Yeah, doctors in for business. Um, so so what does charge what you're worth look like in a practice? Because at the very core of CAS is value pricing, fixed fee pricing. So, what does that look like in a practice to charge what you're worth?
I think part of it is just that self-awareness of have you identified what your value is of what you bring to the clients, right? And we've talked about this too, but how are you conveying that value to the client so that they really know what you're doing and you're just not doing all this behind the scenes and then you make it look like super easy to where it diminishes your value, if that makes sense.
Of course.
Um, so it's just like having that self-awareness and identifying it with the team, right? Like, and so we did do that. We just brought the team together and said, what do you think our value is to these clients? And it was such a great exercise that we did with the team because in that we also identified the clients that we thought had bad behavior characteristics that we knew we didn't want. Um, and there's some of those clients that were the wrong clients where it didn't matter how much we did charge them, they were never going to be a client that our team wanted to work with, if that makes sense, right? And so where this also became important was the team's happiness was actually more important than the types of clients, if we had bad clients that we had. And thank God I had the autonomy to let clients go if that was the case, because I wouldn't want a team member to leave over a client that they didn't care to work with. That's not fun. That's
Right.
not fun.
Well, and you said you opened it up to your team, and let's be honest, like a lot of these non-ideal clients may have stuck around had you not opened that door for people to come forward and be honest about the clients who are probably a pain in the ass.
Yeah. And so, I just felt again really team first, right? Your team deserves clients who value them, a model that like funds, you funds training and process and standards and leaders that won't trade their well-being for top line revenue, right? Again, and I know I've said this so many times, but it's like, can we just focus on gross margin rather than top line revenue? Let's just take what we have. Let's not, keep adding. to this, kind of average book of business. But it really does take that leader to really protect the team.
So you talk a lot about protecting your team, and, this change just doesn't happen with a new pricing strategy. It really is a cultural shift, where the goal is no longer just, like, double the revenue, like that top line like you've talked about, but to have good clients and to have good margins rather than that gross revenue. So can you just, like, maybe talk about, the guardrails around growth?
Sure. I mean, obviously, I do think when you say guardrails, growth without those guardrails is it really just noise, right? And what are you adding to? I think what's really important for CAS leaders is that they do have the autonomy, though, to say, I'm increasing our margins today, even if the top line revenue stays the same, right? Getting back to that gross margin. That's true sustainability, right? If we don't do this, we just keep throwing money and people at a book of business that just is not profitable. It's eating up all of our hours and time capacity and the team where we could be selling higher margin work. So the low margin clients need to either have their fees raised or they need to be terminated and replaced with a higher margin client rather than, just adding people for the sake of keeping the low margin client. Um, but again, CAS leaders need this autonomy to be able to do that. And because when they do terminate and they have replaced it with another client, they might not be doubling their top line revenue, but they're building a better practice.
So you talk a lot about the shift that needs to happen, having those conversations with clients, and you had to have those conversations back in the day as well to really get to move out your non-ideal clients and your ideal clients in. I think this can be another whole podcast, but I did want to mention too, like, I'm sure a lot of firms are often thinking, like, how do I even start that conversation?
Right.
So I think we need to come back with an episode on just literally that one view. How you have that conversation. Is there a script? What can you learn from those conversations? How do you cascade that down to the team? But having that conversation is difficult, especially when you're a nice person and you really like your clients, even though they may not be profitable.
And it takes a lot of time to assess and really dig in to be able to explain to your client why why you're losing money on them. Um, but and we could do a whole nother podcast on that, but just like as a super quick answer, and I think I've said this before, is I just made it like a breakup like conversation. Like it's not you, it's me, right? Like this isn't your fault. This was like literally this was my fault. This was my fault that I didn't assess and that I haven't been billing you what it takes for us to maintain your account. And at that point I was then going, here's all the value that we bring. Here's everything, but I did that at the end, right? When I should have been doing that all along the way. Um, but it was like that breakup kind conversation in email and just said, we need to like double, triple your fees. And I completely understand if that doesn't work for you. And we're happy to help you, off board and find another firm to move your work to. But at the end of the day, here's what we're doing for you. And out of all of those conversations, I didn't lose a client. But I'm like,
Yeah,
why
I
was I
hear that a
afraid
lot.
yeah. Like, why was I afraid to have this conversation though? And so I think, going into it being disarming and it's not the client's fault because it wasn't their fault. It was mine.
Yeah. And we all build that up in our head, that, like, that complete and utter fear of having that conversation, which typically ends up being just fine because you can go into these conversations, you can have them gently, you can have them diplomatically, just like you explain. And at the end of the day, typically the client's like, "You're right, it's not a good fit." Or sometimes they jump on board and say, "Wish you'd had this conversation sooner. I see all the value. Charge me the fixed fee."
Right. Exactly. And I think at that point it's a different level of respect because they're like, oh, well, you are, you
Yeah.
do know your value. Yeah,
Yeah. And when you come to the table with that conversation too, it just adds to your credibility. So it's yes, I get that it's a conversation to fear, but I think once you have a couple, they really are freeing. They feel good. And then I think firms can get on a roll with having these conversations on a regular basis when they need to.
exactly.
Yeah. Can we talk briefly about where onshore versus offshore dynamics fit in here? Because this comes up all the time.
I think it really, and this can be a whole separate podcast too. But I think when we think about the client relationships and what firms are expecting out of CAS teams with the right and the wrong clients, I just think that a lot of firms are doing fantastic things with offshore teams, fantastic. And so this is not about that. This is about the day-to-day relationship with the client, and it's a time zone, and and so where we see firms, just trying to mainly scale up their offshore team without simultaneously scaling up their onshore team for that relationship piece. um, I think that that's where firms and us too, where we struggled with that, and that was contributed to a lot of these issues.
Yeah. Yeah. This is all good stuff, but let's get to the really good stuff, the stuff that firms love. They love those action items they can walk away from. So, Christine, can you give us a playbook? And what I mean by that is if someone listening to this recognizes themselves in your story, what are the top moves they can make this quarter to start making that change?
Yeah. First, it's to assess, to really, truly take, a day, a couple days to assess your book of business, right? And then to identify those clients that you need to have the conversation with and reset pricing with grace, but also with data. Again, bringing information to them to the table to say, here's what and why. I think, open with the outcomes. Here's what changed. Here's the value, here's the right fee, offer options of, tiered packages maybe that they can elect into, or, they elect out of, right? Um, Second, I would say is again, protect your people, right? That I think is the highest thing for me is without your people, you can't do the work, right? So scheduling things, holding clients accountable to their timeline so that your staff aren't like a constant pick up, put down, and we weren't able to complete anything, and they're running in circles. Um, and celebrate, the right fit exits. Like uh, I and please understand when I was protecting people too, and we all have this, and every firm has this. There would be a client where they wouldn't work or they weren't a good fit, and we'd move them to a different team to just say, "Okay, maybe you just didn't fit with that team." And then when they didn't fit with the second team, then we knew, and it was like, "Okay, you know what? You're just not a good fit for
It
us."
never
And
works. Never works to
and
move the problem somewhere else, right?
and your staff value that,
Yeah.
right? They're like,
Yeah.
"Wow, I'm important." And um so that, standardize the work, right? One close cadence, one report package, for each of those tiers as much as possible. Obviously, you have a lot of customization within CAS, but let automation carry routine so, your team can carry the conversation in that advisory relationship. And finally, I would just say, from what my learning was practice what you preach.
Yeah. That's always a good one. That's a beautiful golden rule. I want to end by hearing some last thoughts from you. So, what advice did you wish that you would have had when you were in the middle of it back then?
Um, I would say one is that identify your value. You have to self-assess and know your value. And that value isn't just volume, and that also having boundaries with clients builds trust. And and that's important because without we just went into, it's a free for all. We'll take, anything. You can call us at any time. You can, treat us however you want. But the boundaries, build that trust, and that courage in pricing is an act of service to your clients, your team, your firm, and to yourself.
Yeah. Yes. Um, we talked earlier too about I think of this I want this to be the last thing we talk about. So there's a new definition of growth that needs to happen here as well, right? Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I do feel like that's part of the theme here. There's a lot of changes that need to happen, but at the core of it, we keep talking about growth, top line revenue versus margins and like where real revenue's coming in. So it's got to be a new definition of growth that we need to share.
Well, and this is where I keep challenging firms is can we just fix what we have? Can we grow and fix what we have existing, right? And let's level that with what we have rather than adding clients that just adds to the chaos and the time of the day. So again, and I feel like I say this a lot to firms, but it's just pause. Just pause for a second because at the end of the day, if you increase your margins by, 20% without having to increase your top line revenue, isn't that where the value is? Right. And then once you have that standardization and you have everything in play and you have the playbook, you're able to just really follow what you have identified as your ICP. And those are the clients that you're bringing in, and you've eliminated the clients that do not fit your ICP.
Yeah. Beautiful. Like, Christine, thank you for getting us there. Like, we talked about so much good stuff today, but really at the heart of it is that I love going back to your what you call failures and how they do fuel success, and then bringing that forward to really help firms understand that you can work better. You don't just have to work more. That is a tradition that definitely needs to be broken.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that you say that because we would tell the team all the time, like, we're just wanting you to work smarter, not harder. Like, I'm not asking for more hours
Yeah. So let's
because
let's
that's
let's build a practice that is obviously
sustainable.
profitable. Yeah. It's obviously profitable, but it's also the practice the owners deserve, but also the team deserves. I think that's always really important because like you said before, without the team, you don't have a firm.
And you don't have firm, and they want to feel success too.
They do. They do. Excellent. We're going to come back next time with more awesome cast insights from Christine Triantos. That's our promise to you. And this is fantastic.